Howdy, Immortalium here. Today I'm reviewing Lone Wolf and Cub Omnibus 1. So, what did I think of this is the first question, and it is a very good manga. I enjoyed it a lot. There are flaws though, and we will have to go into that. First of all though, what is Lone Wolf and Cub? Well, a bit hard to say there first of all, because usually when I describe the premise of a series, I usually go by if it's an animated first episode or if it's a manga, it's first chapter. First chapter of Lone Wolf and Cub doesn't really give anything on the background of the characters though, so in fact one of the ironic things is, and I'd say possibly a criticism of Dark Horse, is the fact that they give more information on the back of the manga volume than you get throughout the whole book of itself. So basically, you learn more about this character from reading the blurb than you do from reading the manga, which, but when I say learn more about the character, I mean the background, of course, but, that isn't good, in my opinion, that's kind of like spoilers for later, so that is a criticism. Now, they had to write something down, so I guess that's the best thing they could have put down, But still, it is a tad annoying. Still though, basically you have two characters, the wolf and the cub. The wolf is Ogami Ito, and the son, his son, which is 3 years old, is Daigoro, I think his name is. And basically the premise of the series so far, in this first 3 volumes, is that they travel from place to place, hiring themselves out, himself out, to, make money, to, do assassinations. He's an assassin, basically. He's a Ronin, which is a samurai without a master. And he's basically, he becomes assassins and kills people. And a lot of the stories in this serve 2 purposes. One is to show how, cunning and intelligent, as well as how brilliant a fighter Ogami is. I mean, he comes up with really elaborate plots in order to be able to get close to his targets so that he doesn't have to take on too many enemies, or at least, reduce the number of enemies he has to encounter, while at the same time he is able to wipe out practically all enemies he comes across. So that's, shows how strong he is. The other is to show how chaotic the country is at the time. This is set in the Edo period in Japan, and basically chaos is rampant, basically. Not just that, the states are warring or anything. Like, the shogun is, in theory, in control of all of Japan. He has these advisors, just give me one moment and I'll get the name, who go from place to place examining, and making sure that everything's going fine. The Daiken and the Daiken Sho, which they basically run locally and they report back to the shogun. So, but even then, there's all these lords, plotting rebellions and, committing corruption, and there's bandits rampaging everywhere. It's a chaotic and horrible place to live. So, that's the main purpose of these 3 volumes, as well as a little bit on the background of the 2 characters. I mean, as I said before, it's not much. You get more on their background from the back of the book, but you do get a bit more, including there's a sequence actually which I loved. I won't spoil it, but it was basically Ogami, deciding whether or not to bring his son along on his trials or adventure, or whatever you want to call it. And it's actually a fantastic little sequence. Anyone who's read it already, because as you know, this is the second time it's been printed, knows the sequence I'm talking about, and it is fantastic, that little sequence, even though it's quite creepy as well. So so basically when it comes to the story, it's basically kind of it follows the kind of Monster of the Week thing, except it's not a Monster of the Week, it's the Mission of the Week, So that can be a bit annoying in that, you know, I was going in, you know, from the blurb, it made it sound like there's more of an overarching, you know, story to it. And I'm sure that might be expanded upon. I mean, keep in mind, this is a 28 volume series. Now, the omnibuses might come out to like 9 or 10 or something like that, but it's a long series, so plenty of time to bring in the main story. So, first of all, next thing to talk about is the art. Now, the art is particularly interesting because this was made right at the beginning of the Gekiga movement. This was made in the 1970, and basically the Gekiga movement was a rejection of, you know, the fact that manga was only aimed at children. It was a rejection of Tezuka's, you know, cutesy looking Disney-esque art style. So basically what they go for here is extreme realism, which, you know, when I say extreme realism, I mean it's not like it's photorealistic, but I mean it's far more realistic than anything else you would have come across at the time, and in fact still looks more realistic than most manga released today. So that that can be a bit disorienting for a lot of manga fans, because as far as I can tell, it seems that the modern art style of manga is like a combination of Tezuka's Disney-esque looking art style along with the more kind of realistic proportions of Lone Wolf and Cub. If you want to look at an example of Lone Wolf and Cub's art style, this might be a good one to kind of show. Basically, very kind of detailed, very good thing I didn't flip open there. Very yeah. So another thing I must point out as well is that the way the panels are structured are a bit, you know, awkward at times, in my opinion. The fella who created the art for this, Goseki Kojima, he wasn't a manga artist before he made this. He was an illustrator, and you know, he painted stuff, and in fairness it does look like paintings, but one thing that can be a bit odd is basically there's a lot of times where literally the art will cross over across the two pages, but it's not like a double splash page. Basically it's like across one big massive panel across the two pages, and then, like, you know, more panels down there, and it can be a bit odd sometimes. I mean, when one's used to reading normal manga and normal comics or whatever graphic medium you want to talk about, basically it's odd for, you know, this to go across. Now, it's not bad when it's at the top of the page, because, you know, at least then, you know, the rest of the page you can follow quite relatively easily, but it can be a bit disturbing, or not disturbing, disorienting I should say, if, you know, you start off at the top, you pop down on that page, and then you suddenly realize it's one spread across two pages, so you've got to read across the top two pages first before getting down to the middle. So, you know, that creates a bit of awkwardness, in my opinion, but it is a very nice effect, you know. Actually, before we go on as well, I should talk about the fighting in it, as well as a bit of the premise. Actually kind of reminds me of another work I've read called Dororo, which was a manga by Tezuka. It dealt with samurai again, although it was nowhere near as realistic as looking as this. It was actually finished, I think, the year before this started, so it might have gotten some kind of influence. But the biggest comparison I can say between Dororo and Lone Wolf and Cub is the way the fighting takes place. Basically, whenever there's a fight sequence, it's generally dealt in two pages, and it's quite often done in this kind of swirling motion. If you look at the top, basically it's like a whirlwind. The enemies are completely annihilated, and then on the next page it's all done. So, you know, that if you're going into this for the fighting, really, you know, you're not really going to get too much out of it. I mean, you know, back then I'm sure like that was a big action sequence, but now we're used to battles, you know, lasting like a volume or something like that, or half a volume. But basically, if you're going to this, yeah, you'll have those action sequences which look great, but they're not the reason to come here. The reason to come here is basically the art, the very strong art, the missions, you know, this sheer cleverness of Ogami. And another thing as well to point out is how detailed the Edo period of this is. I mean, it even says at the beginning of the book that there were so many phrases in this that could not be translated into English properly, that, you know, there's no English equivalents, that basically they left the words in the translation and they have a glossary at the back with all those words, you know, like for example, I had to look back at it to find the Daikan and Daikanshu. And now there's some I recognize already, like I'm familiar with the Ryo already and Ahina, but you know, it's great, and the Edo period is really set well. So that is another reason to read this. The character development, though, interestingly, hasn't really started yet, at least not for me. You see, having read the back as well, which gives a kind of a detail on the two, you know, authors. He said the writers, you know, is like it's the most important thing to have, you know, to develop your characters. Really, that hasn't started yet, not in my opinion. Although I guess you get to see a little bit of how he reacts to the situation. But even then, you know, he acts differently because he needs to act out his plans. You know, like if he needs to get close to a lord, he might, you know, try to rob someone so that he can get taken to the lord, and then he'll be able to, you know, attack or something like that, which isn't like him at all. You know, that's not the kind of character he is. So that can be a bit confusing in character development as well. But I think that's really... Oh, I guess the other thing to say is... so I've already kind of discussed the translation. It's relatively clean. There's some bits that stand out a bit, like considering how, you know, Japanesey, I should say, it feels, because of the fact they leave so many words in. There's a few kind of you know, a bit kind of threw me off a bit, some bits, like one time they go, "Oh my lord," and I'm thinking to myself, what do they mean, Jesus? And actually then I think to myself, oh, actually they probably meant Buddha. But, you know, that threw me off a little bit sometimes. And sometimes they speak with a kind of modern slang or something like that, just once or twice, which was also a bit odd, but that's probably just a nitpick of the translation. You know, it's fine. It's a good translation. The quality of the book itself is pretty good. First of all, as I've explained before, when Lone Wolf and Cub was first released, it was released at about this size. Actually, the other day I went into a store and actually saw the original sized ones, and they are small. They are small, and like I'm thinking to myself, you know, that must be really difficult to read, because they are pocket sized, and you know, you'd have to squint with glasses on in order to be able to read them. So, you know, that seems a bit crazy. So you have a nice trim size here, which is just ever so slightly smaller than the Viz Media Yen Press size. The Tokyo Pop size is really what they're called. And the quality of the paper itself is also excellent. You know, it's nice and thick. You know, it's white, it's creamy. You know, it's great paper as well. So basically, there is the only issue with this edition, really, besides a few, you know, one or two iffy moments of the translation, is the fact that it's flopped. But I guess that's more of an, you know, this is a series that's well known with the graphic novel community, you know, besides the manga community. So I guess they wanted it to be, you know, readable, I guess I should say, although I've used that with quotes, because of, you know, for people who don't read manga on a regular basis. Although it shouldn't be that difficult in my opinion. So basically, it's a great start. I'll definitely be getting the next omnibus, and I recommend you get this omnibus as well. It's the best that the English translation has ever been released yet, so, you know, that's great. You know, one or two nitpicks, like the story, overall story hasn't really gotten going yet, although there's a lot of preparation in this. There's those missions that show off how smart, how powerful he is. You know, you have your great art style, which is just, you know, a little awkward at points, you know, in panel arrangement, but that's fine. And, you know, great translation, and it's a great period piece. So do I recommend it? Yes, I do. I think it's great. I'll be looking forward to the next omnibus. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.